All right, welcome back to the second episode of Inside the Hedges. I am here with former Rice quarterback Taylor McCarg. I am Matthew Bartlett, editor-director of The Roost. We are here to guide you through this. I'm running out of adjectives, Taylor. Whatever you want to call this season, we're going to kick things off by walking through the Middle Tennessee game, as crazy as that was, and then we're going to kind of look forward and preview the contest up ahead, Rice and Southern Miss. So we can go a couple ways. I guess we're kind of talk big picture thoughts first. If you had a couple things that you kind of took away from the game, Taylor, we'll jump right in. What do you think overall?
Well, I thought the second half for Rice, I think they sort of got their legs under them and they found out a little bit more about themselves. I thought they were really conservative in the first half. And they did look like a team that were playing their first game. There were some sloppy penalties, 3 turnovers, some things that you just don't expect. That the interception from Mike Collins in the first half was forced. The drop punt by Trammell, that's obviously something that, for him especially was a mistake that you're not used to seeing. And it looked like Middle Tennessee, this was their 7th game. I mean, when you just watched the execution for both teams, it looked like one had played 7 and one was playing their first. So there's a lot to build on. I think Rice has still a lot ahead of them that's promising because Conference USA West is really not that good. And the other thing that I would say is Middle Tennessee, that was the best game that they've played to this point in the season. They struggled closing out games in conference, and their offense, their efficiency passing the ball, Asher O'Hara played really well. So a couple breaks here and there that Rice has go the other direction and they win. But if they play cleaner football, I think they win that game by, 10 points, 2 scores, 14 points maybe. So still a lot to look forward to, but obviously a heartbreaking loss, especially the way that it happened with the missed field goal at the end.
Yeah, so it's funny enough, I watched that in real time. And I was like, I think that bounced 4 times. And then you get caught up with, everything that's going on because the game is still happening. And, while you're there covering it, you can't just pull up Twitter and watch everything go. And so I tweeted out and I go look at it afterwards. And it wasn't till probably I'm trying to think, maybe Sunday afternoon that I watched the replay for the first time. And I was just like, did that really happen?
Yeah.
Rice fans might know former Rice cross country runner Adolfo Cavario. He good friend of the Roost podcast, and so I tagged him on Twitter and I said, Adolfo, you're a rocket scientist, literally. What are the odds of this happening? And he said that, assuming, not taking into account wind and all of the other variables, but just the math of deflecting off crossbars, we're looking at a 1 in 3 million chance of something like that happening. So that's how close Rice was to winning that football game.
Yeah, it was brutal. And I was calling the game, and my first reaction, just as an alumni and fan of the program, was I wanted to cuss at the TV or cuss at the monitor because I wanted it to go in, but I can't do that. So I can't do that on a live broadcast. And it was unbelievable. I haven't seen anything. I mean, I've been around Rice football for 10 years now. I haven't seen anything like that. And we've been through a lot of crazy wins and losses. So that was certainly unique.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's funny because, if that kick bounces in, then we're talking about a Rice team that had their first game jitters, like you said, made a bunch of mistakes, outscored Middle Tennessee 21-6 at the end of the game, found a way to overcome 4th and 24 and come back from all of that to win a game in overtime. And all of a sudden, I think the narrative becomes a lot different. And the only thing that changed was one more bounce off an upright.
And I think that's what Coach Bloomgren, his quote to them, this isn't going to define us. And I think that's important because, like you mentioned, there were a couple breaks here and there that go the other way. And Middle Tennessee's kicker hits his career long to force overtime. I mean, that was the edge of his range. And he hits, I think it was a 48-yarder to force overtime. They just didn't have breaks down the stretch that they needed, but they also put themselves in that position. They didn't play particularly well in the first half, didn't play all that well in the third quarter, had a bad turnover that we mentioned earlier. So early game jitters, not able to overcome it. And that's where you got to figure out a way to win those, because when you figure out a way to win the close games like that, you gain that confidence. And that's where you start to, our 2013 season where we won conference, we won 3 or 4 close games like that where should have won by bigger margins, but you got to figure out a way to close those out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a part of that, or at least kind of what I'm envisioning being an answer to closing those games out. And I think you saw him kind of come on as the game progressed. You mentioned a little bit, Rice quarterback Mike Collins playing in his first game with the Owls, started out 2 for 10, and a lot of his passes, at least from my vantage point, were sailing, just amped up and going way over guys. You mentioned the interception. I think he overthrew his man on that ball by 5, 6, 8 yards. It wasn't even really close. But then, kind of settle in after that, after starting out 2 for 10, and becomes the first Owl to throw 4 touchdown passes in a game since 2016. Like, that in itself is a pretty remarkable correction. So which is the Mike Collins that we can expect going forward? Is it the one who was rusty at the start, or are we getting 4 touchdowns a game?
Well, I think 2 things. Number one, I think we'll see more of the second half version of him, just because he settled in and is back to, hadn't played real meaningful snaps since 2018. I think play calling also improved in the second half. I think they did him some favors, featuring, they had a couple different wrinkles of a play where they got the tight end in the flat that were super simple, easy completions that just got the ball in playmakers' hands quickly. Jordan Myers had a big second half because of that. And I think they got the ball downfield a little bit. The play calling improved in the first half. That 2 for 10 stretch that you're talking about, Middle Tennessee it walked everybody down close to the line of scrimmage, playing man defense, and the plays down the field weren't really man beaters, and they were tough throws that I think he still is capable of making. But you got to be really accurate to hit those. There's not really a margin, much of a margin for error there. So I would expect to see more out of him, like what we saw out of the second half out of him moving forward.
Yeah, and a big part of that, you mentioned that tight end screen to Jordan Myers, and man, he's the short yardage back for this offense, and went over the top a couple times. He had a big game, but 11 of 18 completions for Mike Collins went to tight ends. Of course, he had that big touchdown pass to Jack Bradley, his first of his career, like what we saw there. But especially, we had the Brad Rosner opt out. We have Austin Trammell, old reliable, the sheriff back there. He had August Pete go down, and I feel like half the receiving core is in a mash unit right now. So it's going to fall to the tight ends. I think those guys were probably one of the bright spots that I took away from the offense. Is there anything else that Jordan Myers can do that we haven't seen yet?
Well, I think the tight ends are certainly going to be featured moving forward. I think you also saw sometimes tight ends aren't great after the catch, but that was not the case with Jordan. He really thrived after the catch, and we saw even on a couple of those screens where they got it to him in the flat, he made guys miss and got upfield. Bradley had a nice play up the seam as well. I think they'll figure out more creative ways to get those guys the ball, and also figure out a way to get Trammell involved in the game early. I think he went into the fourth quarter. I know he went into the second half, but I think it was the fourth quarter before he had his first catch. You got to figure out a way to get him involved sooner. Manufacture ways to get him the ball, whether it's jet sweep, whether it's screens, specific bootlegs that you target him. Got to get him involved in the offense earlier in the game.
Yeah, absolutely. He makes a lot of things run more smoothly. And then I think a part of this, and this was when we did the preview for the Middle Tennessee game, we talked about their run defense, Middle Tennessee's rather, and how, it was not their strongest facet of the game. Juma Otaviano comes back, carries the ball 20 times, gains 84 yards, average 4.2. Kalen Griffin kind of off the bench, came into the fourth quarter, had a 10-yard run, 20-yard run back to back, ended up averaging 5 a carry on 9 attempts. Having multiple backs like that is huge for this offense, and this is really the first time really for Juma since the Old Dominion game, which was all the way back in 2018, that he's really gotten a feature role. And the first time we've seen Kalen Griffin, I know, you'll appreciate this as a quarterback, having to reset with position groups a year over year. What's it like turning to new faces all the time, and then all of a sudden you see those guys actually come out and have good games?
Well, it gives you encouragement for the rest of the season. And they did. They stepped up and played well. Juma had 20 carries in any game is quite a bit, especially when you feature another back as well. We know that Rice is going to try and establish the run every game. I think they had 180 something yards. I know it was I think it was 183 for the game on the ground, which is a nice. The production is there. It needs to be more complimentary in the first half. I think in the first half it was really. They established the run on first down, I think exclusively on every drive, except for maybe one that I can think of. Juma played really well, though. I think they both, Juma and Kalen, did a nice job. When they make their cuts, their lateral cuts, it's one cut and go. Not a lot of dancing. They're downhill runners. And as we, it's the DNA of this offense. So we'll see more of that throughout the year.
Yeah, I think so. And especially the 18 play drive.
Yeah.
Watching that live from the press box and watching them, I think that coming into the game, we talked about explosive plays, and we mentioned that was going to be a big thing. And Rice had 6 plays in that game that went 20 yards or more, after averaging about 2.25 last year. So we saw the explosive component, even with the rust from the offense. But seeing an offense that can go 18 yards and convert 3 or 4 third downs in the process, and never really, there wasn't a moment in that drive where I felt like it was out of control. Seeing that was something that I don't think we've seen from this team consistently over the past 2 years, at least not to that degree.
Yeah, and you have to have both. We had a graphic up in the third quarter that touched on how important it was for Rice to have those explosive plays, where their wins in the last 3 games of the season last year, they had more explosive plays. It was close to the amount that they did for the first 9 games of the season that they had lost. So having those explosive plays, it's complementary football where you can have a drive like that. You can have a 15 or an 18 play drive and score. And that's where you establish yourself physically. But you also, it's nice to have those drives that you go, 60 yards in 5 plays and have a couple big pops in there, or the long touchdowns, the 30+ yard touchdowns, that those big excitement plays where momentum really comes from. It's important to have both. And every good offense needs the ability to be able to slow it down and also up tempo. I thought Rice, when they needed it most, did a good job in up tempo when they had to spread it out a little bit and force the ball downfield. In that last drive of the game, that in regular time, when they scored, when they hit Trammell on the post and they hit him on the back shoulder fade, there were 2 deep balls before that Collins overthrew both of them, but they were getting the ball downfield to guys that were open. They just didn't hit the first 2. So they
were open.
They were open. It wasn't like it was real tight windows either. I mean, they had guys beat by a step or 2. So again, I think when you asked about Collins earlier, I think we will see it's your first game with a new quarterback, play caller and quarterback. You're feeling out what you have. You're feeling out some new personnel. They'll be in a better rhythm. I would expect the offense to start faster this week.
Yeah, that would be nice to see. And, 34 points, if you tell me coming into the game that Rice is going to score 34, I think you take that, especially. And I think this team averaged somewhere around the mid or low 20s through most of last year and kind of picked it up. I got to, I think, 31 maybe at the end of the season when they started winning games. If this offense can score 34 points, that's going to put you in ball games, which, I guess we got to get to the other side now and talk about the defense. Defense gave up 40, which, take off the 6 points that you get in overtime, and it's 34, which is still a lot and a lot more than we expected from this defense. Right. But we did talk about, last week when we previewed this game, that the lack of bodies in the secondary, and you're turning to 2 guys, 2 corners making their first collegiate starts, at least D1 starts, and in the secondary, just pretty young. What do you do well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. First, we'll figure out what Rice changes. But what do you kind of think about the performance of the defense as a whole? Is this kind of something that we can make some tweaks and cover up, or is the defense kind of in more of a trouble spot than we'd hoped?
No, I think the defense coming into the season, we expected to be the stronger unit with all the production coming back. The secondary was a little banged up, and I think you saw their youth. CJ Wyndham, number 81, had a big day, and they started to flex out the safeties to try and give some help. I think playing true freshman corners. Fresh had a nice game for the most part for a freshman especially, but the secondary is a little bit banged up. The front seven looked really strong. Blaze looked great again. Twice, though, I mean, you had a fumble return for a touchdown, and then you also had Trammell's fumble. They actually bowed up and just held them to a field goal there. But Rice didn't, they gave them some short fields, didn't help out in that regard, and so the offense can certainly help. But the secondary, that unit will get progressively better week over week, and you'll really see the improvement because when you're playing that many young guys, they get better in a hurry. That's where you see the improvement from week 1 to week 2, 3, 4. There's usually a big jump with guys that are playing, getting their first live action.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point. You take out, just for evaluation standpoint of where we are. You take out the 6 points in overtime. Hopefully you don't get there, but you look at the 3 points from the Trammell fumble and the 7 points rather. Directly scored on that strip sack, and you're talking about a defense that gave up 24 points in regulation. That wasn't spotted on short field. And if this offense can be, even with the turnovers, this offense can be that efficient, this game is starting to feel not as maybe painful. It's still painful, but not as without hope as it was in the moment when you saw the kick bounce off.
Yeah. Again, I think these are the points that you look back and say there were so many opportunities to win, but you got to learn quickly from these, right? Because it's a short season and there are no moral victories, right? You got to go convert these and win games. But when you go back and watch the tape, there's a difference in losing like this and getting flat out beat. And they did not get flat out beat. They played well. Really should have won the game, battled back and should have won the game. And that's where you go in the film room and say, as frustrated as you are and as hard as it is to stomach this loss, a lot of hope and a lot of there's a lot of optimism and things that you can point to say, look, we can be good this season right now. We just need to solve these problems, but we have the pieces there. And so I know we'll break down Southern Miss in a little bit, but this is a game that Rice right now, I think Vegas has it. We're a point dog right now. So I think this is certainly a game that Rice should win with all the uncertainty that they have around their program. And you got to get just back in the saddle and focus in and try and get a conference win.
Yeah, absolutely. I was kind of following the line a little bit. It's a good gauge, even if you're not a betting person. But Rice was about a 3-point dog heading into the week, and then Southern Miss has a coaching change, and apparently Scotty Walton, interim head coach, was worth 2 points. So now it's down to 1. But we do want to get to Southern Miss, and we won't keep everybody too long. But first, I think it's kind of fun. It's worth doing and mentioning because sometimes, especially when the result isn't what you want it to be, we can kind of lose the good things from that. So I did want to go ahead and hand out a couple of game balls. It can be the star of the show. It can be a little guy that had to add a big third down play on offense or defense, either or. But I do want to give us the opportunity to kind of make this a weekly thing where we recognize some guys that had a big game. So I'll kick it off and I'll start. We hit him a little bit. I'm going to give my game ball this week to Jordan Myers. I think career day receiving, and really if he doesn't come through and help jumpstart the offense in the passing game, I think that was huge for Mike getting able to do what he did. And then coming back there and being a running back as well as a receiver and doing everything he did. I think the versatility of Jordan Myers was huge. Yeah,
he played really well, and I think you'll see more of him. We keep saying it, but they really got their legs under him in the second half and got into packages and plays that they were more comfortable with and moved the ball more effectively. And Jordan obviously was featured quite a bit. I'm going to do two. Austin Trammell for the offense made the plays when they needed them most, and that's what you need out of your playmakers. And the deep post to get them downfield on the 4th and 24, the touchdown, and the 2-point conversion, which gets lost now, but that was a tough catch as well. I think when you have a guy like that you can lean on in the biggest moments, that's huge. And then the other's Blaze Aldridge. He's all over the field, and you could probably give him the game ball really on defense almost every week, more than likely. And we'll try and spread the love. But for this first week, it's not a shock that they're both captains because they had a huge impact on the game.
Yeah, that sack that Blaze has at the end of the game, and really that's kind of a moment where the defense. You just feel like, man, if they can get one more stop, like I think they got a shot, and he did. He was the guy that came through. So I will allow you to go pick two. I think that's totally fair. And we do want to transition and go ahead and take a look at Southern Miss. One quick note, I guess a couple quick notes while we get into it. So, of course, Jay Hopson is the coach for this season. The first game against South Alabama, he and Southern Miss, I guess the term that they're using is part ways, however you want to define that. Scotty Walden comes in as the interim, and he's over there for, I guess, 5 games, and then he goes and has COVID last week, so he is watching their Liberty game from his own house, and then apparently looking for other jobs. He takes the Austin P job, I guess, on Monday. And, this is a Wednesday. So Southern Miss is going into this game against Rice with their 3rd head coach in 7 games. And their starting quarterback, Jack Abraham, with the COVID related issues that they're having at Southern Miss in Hattiesburg, he missed the Liberty game. We do believe from reports that he will probably be back, but I haven't seen that confirmed as of yet. Backup quarterback Tate Wadley, he'd started a couple games in his career previously, had a big game against Liberty, but he kind of took a shot at the end, so we're not sure if he's going to be available. So Rice is going to be playing a Southern Miss team that will have their 3rd head coach, and we don't know at quarterback. So how do you prepare for that?
Well, you prepare for at the quarterback position, you prepare for all of them. And I know that it sounds harder than it really is, but they run a fairly similar offense regardless of who's in the game. The play calling is pretty similar. This Southern Miss team has really been defined by the defense has not played well to this point in the year. I mean, they've given up just shy of 500 yards a game and 43 points. And a couple of these games, they played Tulane and Liberty and gave up quite a bit. They gave up 56 to Liberty and 66 to Tulane. So that obviously inflates the defensive stats in a negative way. But against Liberty, they really struggled against they had a mobile quarterback that played really well against them. And their scheme with what they do, they run an odd front with a nose tackle, and a lot of times they'll have 3 down. But they have their interior linemen really struggled to keep contained, and quarterback got out on the edge. I don't know how big of an impact it's going to have for Rice, though, because Mike Collins, they don't really feature him in the run game. However, if Giovanni, which we saw last week, he had a role in the run game, I could see that being something that they feature if they're getting a bunch of 3 down from Southern Miss. On the offensive side, it's what you've seen from Southern Miss for a long time. They do a really nice job getting the ball downfield. It's sort of a pass-first offense. They don't run the ball particularly well. Frank Gore Jr. is their feature back, and he's got a couple hundred yards rushing on the year. But they don't, between the tackles, they don't run the ball, again, particularly well. Jason Brownlee is their biggest playmaker out wide, over 100 yards receiving in the last 3 games. So this will be another test for the secondary, and they're going to have to figure out a way to get after, regardless of who's at quarterback. They're going to have to figure out a way to get after them early and often.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because you can't read too much, into what happened last year, because these are 2 teams that have changed a lot
Yep.
Southern Miss has had basically both teams, actually. Southern Miss has had a lot of departures on defense. Rice has had a bunch of injuries. Defenses look pretty different. You got new quarterback for Rice, a new running back core for Southern Miss. But last year, just for reference, when Rice and Southern Miss played, that was a game that was close until the fourth quarter. A long touchdown run on really a broken play defensively. Jack Abraham held to about 200 yards, had no touchdown passes. So we've seen this defense in this scheme solve this offense. Is that something that even with the pieces that we think we can we'll see more of that given the history, or is it kind of just complete reset with so many pieces changing?
No, I don't think it's a complete reset because it's still it's a similar scheme, and even though you're on your third head coach, there's a lot that you can point back to from last year and have confidence in. I think the other piece for Rice to have confidence in is, knock on wood, to this point in the year, there hasn't been nearly there's some injuries in the secondary and Rosner sitting out, but there hasn't been nearly the impact on shuffling pieces around with Southern Miss, whether it's the head coaches, whether it's quarterbacks. They've had other positions impacted by COVID. And I think that uncertainty matters. And when you're swapping back and forth and you have different guys, especially at the quarterback position, that is something that Rice is going to need to capitalize on. But again, I think Rice needs to, if they can focus on themselves, don't worry so much about all of these factors, all these things that are up in the air for Southern Miss. If Rice goes out and takes care of the football and establishes what they found in the second half, with featuring tight ends, getting the ball to Trammell, the offense will be clicking earlier on, because this Southern Miss defense, they've given up, like we mentioned, they've given up quite a bit every game, almost 500 yards, even in Conference USA. 500 yards a game is a lot, and over 40 points a game is a lot. So they're still scoring. They can score. They score over 30 points a game. But I think what Rice needs to do is get a couple stops early. You don't want this to turn into a track meet and get into a shootout. But if Rice can control the clock and not turn the ball over, this is the type of game that they can really wear people down and pull away in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I think so. And something that I've kind of noticed about Jack Abraham, coming into the season, Conference USA Offensive Player of the Year, I believe, or at least a quarterback, first team quarterback, kind of by almost default. He was the most experienced guy. There's a lot of new signal callers in the conference. But a thing with him that I've noticed is he throws a lot of interceptions. And so if it is him that goes back under center, or at least in the gun for Southern Miss, something Rice didn't do very well to begin with against Middle Tennessee is, you would drive down the field to start the game and you kick a pair of field goals, which points are good. But all of a sudden Middle goes down and they score a touchdown. And all of a sudden, even though Rice, it felt like they were controlling the game for the first quarter, and then it's tied. I think especially, if you can put this offense with all of those changes and the shuffling of parts in difficult positions, and hey, it's 14-0 early, and Jack Abraham has to go be Superman, that's a lot harder to do than, hey, it's 14-10. Let's just drive down the field and it's a normal day at the office.
Yeah, I have to convert in those short fields. Rice did have some pretty short fields early in the game. And in Conference USA, you can't trade field goals for touchdowns. You can't trade them anywhere, but you got to score touchdowns in Conference USA, because most of these offenses, you just don't want it to turn into a shootout. And this offense in particular, their DNA is not designed to come back in games. They did it against Middle Tennessee and showed that they have the ability, but that's not what they're designed for. They're designed to take care of the football, control the clock, have those long sustained drives, and also hit some shot plays in the game, but control the game at their tempo and wear people down. So when you get those gifts, when somebody hands you a short field, you got to convert those into touchdowns. But again, I think this game is more to do with Rice controlling what they can and not so much about all the uncertainty with Southern Miss. But I do expect Rice to go out and win this game. I think turning on the tape for them against Liberty, they really struggled on defense. And if Rice can come out and call plays more consistently like they did in the second half, I think this offense will have a big day against this Southern Miss defense.
Yeah, I think so. And something that kind of is, I've been preparing and thinking about this game, we've seen enough from Southern Miss to know that they're not a particularly good football team. like it's understandable with a lot of the problems and challenges that they're facing. Any program going through their third head coach, swapping out quarterbacks. You had five defensive starters leave the team and opt out before the season started. Like that's a recipe for failure across the board. Like it's very hard to overcome those things. So it's understandable that this team is having a down year. But from Rice, I don't think we know. Like we think they're pretty good. But I certainly don't think we've seen enough now to anoint them and say they're going to be very good, or to say that they're not going to be good. Like I feel like we've seen enough from this team to see, they've continued, I believe, from where they were last year. Like I think they're still building better on offense than they were at the beginning last year, and we think we've seen enough from the defense to get there. So the range of outcomes I see for Rice is a lot more positive than what I see from Southern Miss. But we saw from Middle Tennessee, they played a really good game on offense, and Rice didn't play their best game. And so a really good day for Middle Tennessee was enough to beat not a great day from this Rice team. So I think you're right, and maybe it's too cliche and coach-ish to say, we got to play our game and the other team doesn't matter. But I really do believe for this game, if Rice plays their game, I don't think Southern Miss has the horses on either side of the ball to keep up.
Yeah, it really does come down to taking care of the football. 3 turnovers to 1 for Rice and Middle Tennessee. You can't have that happen, and let Mike Collins show off that arm a little bit more. He proved that he can make all the throws. He's got a live arm. And it was their first game, figuring out what they have. And I would expect young teams, especially, a lot of times you see a big jump from week 1 to week 2, and I would expect that this week.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're looking forward to it. We're hopefully going to get to come back next week, and the goal is to break down a win. We will be here regardless either way. I want to make sure that y'all are paying attention. Unfortunately, we don't get you on the call this week. We'll have to make do with somebody else. But hopefully we get you back soon. Where can we follow you in the meantime?
Yeah, at TMcCarg16 on Twitter, and I am calling the next 2, or the only other 2 home games that are scheduled right now. So
breaking news,
not this upcoming weekend, but next weekend as well against UTSA. So be there for that one.
We need cool a siren or some sound effects.
The horn.
Yeah, the horn. That would be good. Yeah. I'm all in. Well, I'm looking for that. You can, as always, find us, my stuff at The Roost on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, everywhere else. Go find our website, and do forget, go ahead and subscribe to our stuff on Patreon. You can get practice reports and injury updates is the big one right now, and watching
right.
who is going to be available. That is certainly going to be key for this defense going forward. And we actually have Carter Spires, who is my co-host on the podcast, put together a really good film room on the Middle Tennessee game. So if you felt encouraged by what Taylor and I talked about, you want to see some film breakdown of what Rice did well and why we kind of feel optimistic for next week, go ahead and check that out. Patreon.com/@theroost. We had or I won't speak for you. I had a good time doing this and talking with you, Taylor, and I'm looking forward to it next week.
Yeah, glad we're doing this. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And there is a lot of reason for optimism out of this team. So looking forward to this week, and hopefully next week we are breaking down a win, like you mentioned.
All right. This is Taylor McCard. I'm Matthew Bartlett. We are signing off from Inside the Hedges. Rice fight.